Raila Odinga has died at the age of 80, bringing an end to one of the most influential political career in Kenyan history. The news of his passing has sent a shockwave across the nation, with President William Ruto announcing a 7-day period of national mourning and a state funeral for the man he called a democratic giant. The former prime minister had been a towering figure in Kenya's politics for more than 4 decades. His death marked the loss of a leader who shaped the country's democratic journey through periods of dictatorship, political reform, and constitutional changes. Raila Amolo Odinga first emerged into politics and public consumption in the early 1980s during the authoritarian rule of President Daniel Arap Moi, at the time when Kenya was firm under one-party rule and the dissent was met with brutal force. Raila became one of the few voices willing to change or to challenge the establishment openly. His early political activism came at heavy personal cost. The Moi government viewed him as a threat to establish order and subjected him to detention without trials. He spent years behind bars, enduring torture and isolation in Kenyan prisons. This experience, rather than breaking his spirit, seemed to strengthen his resolve to fight for democratic change. During the 1980-1990s, Kenya was a dangerous place for opposition politicians. The state machineries were used to crush dissent through arrest, mysterious disappearance, and assassination. The political gatherings were banned, critical voices were silent, and the fear permitted every corner of a public life. Railas refused to be intimidated, along other pro-democracy activists like Martin Shikoku, James Orengo, and Kitobo Imanyara. He organized a protest, challenged the government in courts, and mobilized Kenyans to demand multi-party democracy. The streets of Nairobi became a battleground where these activism clashed with armed police officers who had orders to disperse any gathering by force. The courage displayed by Raila during this period earned him respect far beyond his low ethnic community. He became a symbol of a resistance across Kenya and the wider East Africa region. Young people who had grown up knowing only dictatorship saw in him a different kind of a leader, one willing to sacrifice their personal comfort and safety for the national transformation. His time in detention left physical and physiological scars, but it also transformed him into a martyr of democratic cause. When he emerged from prison, often looking cowed and weakened, crowd would gather to catch a glimpse of a man who had stood up to Moi and survived. The fight for multi-party democracy intensified in the early 90s. International pressure combined with internal agitation forced President Moi to reluctantly allow the formation of opposition parties. Raila immediately threw himself into his new political landscape, helping to establish parties that would challenge the ruling party monopoly on power. His political style was unlike anything Kenyans had seen before. He possessed exceptional oratory skills and could hold crowds spellbound for hours with his speech. His use of Swahili proverbs, witty remarks, and sharp criticism of opponents made him a favorite at political rallies. Thousands would walk for miles just to hear him speak. Raila understood the power of political imagery and messaging. He cultivated a distinctive public persona that combined intellectual sophistication with grassroots appeal, whether dressed in casual shirt or traditional attire. He projected an image of accessibility while maintaining an aura of leadership authority. His political career was marked by strategic alliances that often surprise observers, despite being from the Luo nation, which had historically been marginalized in Kenyan politics. Raila built a coalition across ethnic lines. He formed a partnership with leaders from different regions, sometimes working with former adversaries to achieve common goals. The most dramatic example of these call came in 2002. After years in opposition, Raila made a strategic decision that would change the course of Kenyan history. At a massive rally at Uhuru Park in Nairobi, he endorsed Mwai Kibaki for president with the now famous declaration of Kibaki Tosha, meaning Kibaki is enough. This endorsement proved decisive. The coalition Raila helped build swept to power, ending the 24 years of Moi rule and bringing the first democratic transition of power in Kenyan history. The moment cemented Raila's reputation as a kingmaker who could shift the political winds with a single pronouncement. However, his relationship with the Kibaki's government soon soured. The disagreement over power sharing agreement and the implementation of the new constitution led to a bitter fallout. Raila found himself back in opposition, this time fighting against the government he helped install. In 2007, general election became one of the most contagious in Kenyan history. Raila challenged President Kibaki re-election bid in a campaign marked by high tension and competing claims of victory. When the Electoral Commission announced Kibaki as the winner amid allegation of rigging, the country exploded into violence. Post-election violence claimed over 1,000 lives and displayed hundreds of thousands of Kenyans, communities that had lived peacefully for decades, turned against each other along ethnic lines. The country teetered on the brink of civil war as machete-wielding gangs attack perceived political opponents. International mediation led by former United Nations Secretary General Kofi Annan brought the warring parties to the negotiation table. The talks resulted into a power-sharing agreement that created the position of a prime minister specifically for Raila Odinga while Kibaki retained the presidency. As a prime minister from 2008 to 2013, Raila worked within a fragile coalition government. The arrangement was often tense, with competing power center and policy disagreement. Nevertheless, important reforms were implemented during this period, including the promulgation of new constitution in 2010 that fundamentally changed Kenya's governance structure. The new constitution created a devolved system of government, established an independent judiciary, and included a Bill of Rights that expanded freedom for Kenyan citizens. 5 years later, in 2017, he contested the presidency once more against Uhuru Kenyatta. The election was mired in controversy from the start. When the Electoral Commission announced Uhuru as the winner, Raila challenged the result in the Supreme Court, arguing that the process had been riddled with irregularities. In an unprecedented decision, the Supreme Court nullified the presidential election, citing procedural violation by the Electoral Commission. It was the first time an African court had overturned a presidential election result. The ruling was hailed internationally and victory for judicial independence. Repeat election was scheduled, but Raila withdrew from the race, claiming that necessary reforms had not been implemented to ensure free and fair process. Uhuru Kenyatta won the repeat polls, though turnout was significantly low due to the opposition boycott. The period following the 2017 election was marked by political instability and ethnic tension. Raila's supporters held regular protests, some of which turned violent when security forces intervened. The country seems headed for another prolonged political crisis. Then came another surprise. In March 2018, Raila and Uhuru Kenyatta appeared together at Arambe House and announced they had agreed to work together for the nation unity. The handshake, as it became known, shocked the nation and transformed the political landscape overnight. The rapprochement between the two former rivals initiated a period of relative political calm. Raila became an advocate for national cohesion and worked with the government on various initiatives, including a proposed referendum to amend the constitution through what was called the Building Bridges Initiative. However, the Building Bridges initiative faced a legal challenge and was ultimately struck down by the courts in 2021. The setback did not diminish Raila's influence, but it marked another in a long series of political disappointment in his quest to reshape the country. In 2022, at the age of 77, Raila made his fifth bid for the presidency. He faced William Ruto, who had been Uhuru's Kenyatta deputy but had fallen out with the president. Despite having Uhuru endorsement and the support of the government machineries, Raila lost to Ruto in an election that once again ended in court dispute. After exhaustingly legal option, Raila accepted the court's decision and returned to opposition. Many observers thought this might finally mark his retirement from active politics, but he remained engaged in national affairs and continued to comment on government policy. Throughout his long career, Raila attempted 5 times to become a president but never achieved that goal. Yet his influence on Kenyan politics extended far beyond electoral victories. He shaped political discourse, mentored young politicians, and remained relevant across generations of voters. Regardless of these different perspectives, few could deny his impact on Kenya's end political evolution. From the dark days of one-party rule to the establishment of the new constitutional order, Raila was present at every major turning point in the nation's democratic journey. He came from a political family. His father, Jaramogi Oginga Odinga, was Kenya's first vice president and later a prominent opposition leader. Growing up in a such environment exposed Raila to politics from a early age and instilled in him a sense of public service and a political activism. Raila studied engineering in Germany and worked briefly in that field before being drawn into politics. His technical education gave him an analytical approach to problem solving, though his political career would be defined more by institutions and strategic thinking than by technical expertise. Kenyans across the country call him Baba, meaning father in Swahili. The nickname reflected the affection and respect many felt towards him. For his supporters, he was more than a politician. He was a paternal figure who fought for the interest and gave the voice for the frustration. His ability to mobilize masses was unmatched in Kenyan politics. When he called for a protest or rally, thousands would respond. This grassroots support gave him leverage in negotiation with other political leaders and made it impossible to ignore in any political calculation. Even in his final years, Raila remained active and visible. They attended public events, commented on current affairs and maintained a presence on social media. His health had been a subject of speculation over the years, but he continued to participate in politics with apparent vigor.